Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who want a deeper conversation about the films we watch today. And yeah, we got a great show for you, so let's get into it. That's right, everyone. Tonight, we're going to be looking at a 2018 film that if you weren't paying attention, you would have missed it. But a film that I keep returning to, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, because there just can't be enough plosives. Before we get into that, before I bring on my co-host with the most, I'm going to start the show with begging you all for a like, a subscribe, and a ringy ding of that bell.
No, me?
So yeah, we got that, and yeah, let's get the show on the road. Let's welcome the man, the myth, the legend, my Borscht bro, Mr. Jim Chaboyko.
I'm currently writing a letter to you, Rob.
Well, it is an epistolary novel.
It is.
The movie was based on. We also, Jim, we got a couple of folks in the chat, so let's give a round welcome to a couple of folks that have been great friends of the chat, great friends of the channel. We've got Dragon Movie Guy. Whoopsie, wrong button. And of course, our man in Kuwait City, Jelly Duck 100. All right, enough of that. Yes, folks, we've got what I am claiming is to everyone the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I am going to make the claim tonight, later in the show when we get into the meaning of it all, that this is the anti-Fight Club. But before we do that, let's Jim, with your permission, I am going to let me set the stage here. All right. Well, let me first find my notes. But according to IMDb, kinda at times, Jim, I look at these log lines from IMDb and I'm like, have they even watched the show? Do they have any clue?
It's like an intern writes them.
An intern who hadn't seen the movie. But yeah, here in the aftermath of World War II, a writer forms an unexpected bond with the residents of Guernsey Island when she decides to write an article about their experiences during the war. Now, Jim, ostensibly, this is about a writer. She is she's out of sorts. The war is over, but she's been homeless. She is a popular writer of a pop work. She wants to write something serious again. And meanwhile, there's these folks on Guernsey Island. They started a book club during the fascist occupation. And so she goes out there, and to quote Jim, because it is both a romance and a mystery, to quote from David Bordwell's Perplexing Plots, Popular Storytelling, and the Poetics of Murder, he starts the book with a quote from somebody else, from Jim Thompson. You'd mentioned you're familiar with his work. There are 32 ways to write a story, and I've used every one, but there is only one plot, and and this is what our heroine, Juliet, finds when she gets to Guernsey. Things are not as they seem. Jim, I have been a big fan of this film since it came out. It was, for a while, kind of a, maybe not a guilty pleasure, but I felt maybe a little ashamed of it. But the more I see it, the more I'm like, no, there's more going on here. It isn't just a romance, although it is that. It's not just a cozy mystery, although it is that. It's people dealing with war trauma. It's also, I think for us, Jim, the best movie we've seen about a writer. But it's also about reading. It's about resistance. It asks deep questions about the consequences of resistance, the heroism and courage. I myself, for me, Jim, it's not just a see it; it's a see it again. It's a see it as many times as you can, because it rewards extra viewing. But I say to you, sir, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. For you, Jim, is this a see it or a skip it?
We'll get the title right one of these days. I still haven't, but mastered it. But yeah, I know it's a see it. It's got quite a lot of emotional depth. I think you can be mistaken for assuming that it's sort of like a Downton Abbey costumey retread.
Yeah,
it's got a lot of the same actors. There are scenes when everyone's wearing a hat, so you have those sort of like, it's a costumer's dream. But I do think you're correct, and I think your theory is kind of interesting, that there is some depth here, and it feels like it makes some interesting choices that aren't always made. So that's I'd say definitely a see it. And frankly, it makes Guernsey look a little like Amalfi. Not quite, but it's got the a couple of the shots. Looks like a great place. And if I'm watching a movie, I often like it to take me to a different place, one that I'm not familiar with. So, well,
on that note, so it's a see it at an enthusiastic see it from both of us. Let me get my crap together here. Let me make sure I do this right, Jim. Let's jump into
fisherman. We should be wearing fisherman hats or something.
The spoiler zone. You might be right about that. Jim, let's start on that idea of nostalgia and, could be just a Downton Abbey thing. Uh, why wasn't it for you? I certainly I read some of the criticisms, and I certainly know why it isn't one of those for me, but I'd love to hear what you think first.
Why it isn't like a sort of a typical British thing? Is
Yeah,
that what you're
like
asking? Yeah.
yeah, it was, I think, Jim, in some of the criticisms, even the praise was kind of faint
Mhm.
and written off as, oh well, a pleasant enough costume drama, a pleasant enough period drama.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned Downton Abbey. I think a couple of critics had mentioned Downton Abbey, and
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, really? Are you 100% sure? But I'm
Mhm.
curious what you thought of that. It doesn't sound like you felt that way either, but
No, no, I just think, stakes. A lot of the stuff had happened in the past, and it revolves around this Elizabeth character, and things that happened. But
we're in the
yeah,
spoiler zone, Jim.
yeah, we are too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was being
You can
extra
be more
cautious.
specific about
Sure.
things.
Yeah, so Elizabeth, I did write in my notes, is Elizabeth dead? And yeah, she's dead. And it didn't feel like the kind of movie that would, like, they'd find her in the middle of Germany or something
Yeah.
like that. But no, I just think, like I said before, there's some emotional depth here, that
Yeah.
there were consequences, that the stakes had been high, I guess is a way to put it.
Yeah.
That, a few, like, this takes place in 46, I think, 46, not quite 47, but literally a year after the war ended. And so people are still dealing with that, and that's kind of a mature thing. And this is something that the Brits often do, is that something like a series like Broadchurch, they'll concentrate on the crime, and then they'll have the next season, they'll concentrate on the aftermath of the crime.
Yeah.
And whereas the American model, the Hollywood model, I'll say, is more that sort of like, bam, where you have the climax, and maybe a little bit of denouement. But this one, it just sort of, it's that after effect,
Yeah.
of everything that happened.
It
And that's
is
not
about
always a
trauma.
place. Yeah, and that's not always a place. You kind of say, well, that solves that mystery, and that's not the case here.
Yeah.
And it's also not the case where people follow what eventually happens. It's that the couple gets married and is happily ever after. Most movies end there. Not
Yeah.
that this is that kind of movie, but this is different.
Yeah. For me, I think the way I first read some of the criticisms after I'd seen that, where it's like, and I kind of get what they are saying based on just a total surface. Hey, I'm watching this and taking notes to write about it later. There are, it is a period drama. That's
Mhm.
a fact. And so some of the looks are very appealing if you're into that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
I think if you even were just paying a little more attention, you'd, whether it be the costumes on the characters in Guernsey, they are a lot more, everything's a little more downhill because it is right after the war.
Yeah.
Even though the war is over, they're not all eating steak.
Mhm.
Um, but even our heroine and her friend, like, she is, the way they dress her up, she's certainly affluent.
Mhm.
She apparently made quite a good coin for
Yes.
her popular novels about some quirky character whose name I cannot remember now.
Izzy.
Ah, thank you. Izzy
Izzy. I don't remember the last
Bickerstaff
name.
or
Yeah.
something, some nonsense.
Mhm.
And but it doesn't look quite the couturier, quite the fit.
Mhm.
Everything seems to be a little more, like a little looser, a
Yeah.
little less tailored than it could be. Uh, but the simple fact is, every room they're in, it's not, everything's kind of beaten up,
Mhm.
everything's kind of dirty, everything, it looks like there's a note where she says to her publisher, Sydney, um, there's a trope for you, Jim. Right. Oh my goodness. The publisher who has all day, every day for a writer.
Yeah. I say.
But that as they're looking for a new place for her to live, she notes, wow, fresh paint. But it's only in one
Yeah.
place, a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
Tony apartment, but everything else you can see it's rebuilding. And for
Mm.
folks who don't know, my mother is actually or was, she's passed on, a British immigrant. She came to Canada when she was 12 with the family. 1954, that's when the war rationing ended in
Yeah.
the UK. So yeah, and it has that feeling. No one
Mhm.
feels rich except her beau, Mark, uh, who is a rich American diplomat.
It's got
Obviously comes,
dollar bills.
yeah,
It's got the dollar bills. Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good point.
yeah. So that was kind of my reaction to that. But
Mm.
yeah, maybe it'd be appropriate to kind of lay out the plot a
Sure.
bit more than I did. Of course, she gets to Guernsey. She's all excited about this group. It's a book club. She trots out her book about Anne Bronte that sold almost no copies worldwide.
Mhm.
And they have this great conversation. And then she's all excited because she's going to, great, people love all this quirky stuff like the potato peel pie.
Mhm.
Um, for the Times. She's going to write a piece about them for the Times. We've also, by then, we get the impression that she is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, she's Mark, her boyfriend, her American
Yep.
diplomat boyfriend, has proposed to her.
Mhm.
Says, hey, we can get a place on overlooking Central Park, so he's not poor.
Yeah.
But she's kind of out of sorts. She's looking for a home. She doesn't know where her home is. She's still suffering her own flashbacks about the bomb that obviously killed her parents.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of and she wants to write something real, something serious. And
Mhm.
so it's got a bit of a vibe of, oh, this is a way I can put all these decisions about where I'm going to live and what I'm going to do with Mark. He popped the question on me before I went to Guernsey, and I said yes, but it didn't feel like 100% committed yes. And she even puts
Mhm.
the ring away. So she's having fun. And then she says, I'm going to do a thing for the Times. And all of a sudden, especially one character, Amelia, they all clam up and they're, ooh, I don't know about that.
Mhm.
Especially Amelia. We meet a little girl. There's obviously some mystery around that. The person that brought this, she knows is enough that there's this person, Elizabeth, who has brought them all together. She
Mhm.
was the impetus for this book club,
Yeah.
but she's not there. She's away at present. And of course, that really triggers. Then all of a sudden, the movie the movie kicks into higher gear.
Mhm.
She's like, okay, I won't do this, but maybe I can write something. This is something more important. The war hasn't ended for them. But I think that's
Yeah.
kind of a motif that she established. Will the war ever be over for herself? And I think that's kind of as far as that emotional through line, these people
Yeah.
are looking to deal with the trauma so they can move forward, so they can put the war behind them, and they can't right now, whether it be this group and Elizabeth, and of course her daughter Kit,
Mhm.
which we find out even more mystery about. Not much of a mystery, but still. Um,
Where did
and
this blonde, blue-eyed girl come from?
Who knows?
Uh, who
But even that is, I think, one of those kind of interesting things.
yeah.
And that comes to me, Jim, who did you think the antagonist was in this film?
Well, there's another element to this as well as the war itself, and it's funny they say Germans. I've heard that a number of times, and that's not incorrect. But they
Yeah,
don't say. I don't think they say the word Nazi. They might have, but anyway, there's an element of this of small town life, and especially the bad part of small town life, which is pretty
yeah,
much is symbolically held by the innkeeper, the one that our heroine stays with, who's
yeah,
this religious, but probably religious in the wrong way, like
yeah.
gossipy and self-righteous and holier
Judgy.
than thou and
Yeah,
extremely judgy. And
yeah.
she starts sort of,
Played
you
by
know,
Burn. Oh, no, never mind. Sorry, continue, Jim.
no,
Yeah,
she's particularly poisonous.
yeah.
Like she's dropping little, oh, you don't know these people. You know, they're all bad people. There's secrets there, and all this kind of thing. And that's
And we
a
should
subtle
pray.
one. Yeah, you should stay away from
Yeah,
them. I've been looking through your stuff, and I found that you're sympathetic to them. It's like, ho, ho, ho.
yeah.
Looking through my what now?
What
And
reading her stuff,
yes,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
reading the work this writer is drafting.
Ultimately not a surprise with that character, and
Yeah,
it is well cast because it's
yeah.
kind of like a mean looking woman
Yeah,
with
I'm
super tight curls and stuff, and she does a good job.
yeah.
Super unlikable, but I think that's another element. So there's war, and then there's also
Played by Bronna Gallagher as Charlotte Stimple.
yeah,
Yeah,
still that's yeah,
yeah,
did a great job because you're like my the hair was on the back of my neck up already when we meet her.
yeah.
But yeah, no, so I think there's an element of small town, that small town rumor mill, that destructive quality that can sometimes have, and it's not a romanticization of the small town. It's like, yeah, this sometimes happens where everyone's in each other's business, right? and
Well,
and often they assume the worst.
do you I I don't know. I actually read that character not so much as the I mean, first of all, she's a mirror of Juliet's landlady who's way more supportive,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, who, almost like the jocular, oh, what a quirky, friendly character. And,
Landlady back in
yeah,
London, we
back
should
in
say.
London.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think she kind of served a couple of purposes.
Oh
There
yeah.
is that, whether it be a big city or a small town, she is the one saying, they've got a secret.
Mhm.
And it's really about, the fatherhood. We find out in a great midpoint bit of storytelling, Juliet gets Emilia to open up about what's, about Elizabeth. And and says, hey, I'm going to work hard to find Elizabeth for you. I will bring
Mhm.
this group back together. And so, of course, what did she finally, because of forget, Jim. And
Think
what
of the
did she
children.
find out immediately after that in a great moment of peripeteia? Oh my goodness, Kit's father was a German, one of the occupiers. And so going back to Charlotte, where everyone knows, oh, not Charlotte, we meet, she is a villain, not, I wouldn't say the key antagonist, but because one of the other things is it's about a writer, but also about a bunch of readers. And what
Mhm.
do we have? What is the main conflict when they finally blow up? Because she's reading her private stuff, reading it before the writer is ready to publish, ready for anyone to
Oh
look
yeah,
at
that's
it.
huge.
It's
Yeah.
huge, terrible violation. Then we should look at the Bible. And that is when Juliet says, I don't, almost they have a moment of conflict where they're basically arguing about the text and the subtext of the Bible, the love in the Bible. It's a moment of reading.
Mhm.
And that's how I kind of read Charlotte's character. She is that I will represent, I've read this book, but I don't actually know what's going on in it, or I'm going to choose, like a lot of people,
Yeah.
big city or small, to use this as a thing to judge. I will cherry pick what I like to do what I want to do, which is judge and shame and be a miserable, well, let's
Uh-oh.
be a miserable about it.
Here comes
Or
some gingery language.
or if I was British, I'd be able to say a miserable out of it.
Yeah.
But I am not. What about, I want to go back to this though. I want to go back to the idea of the antagonist, because for me, I thought the antagonist, not the villain, but the antagonist is Amelia, and to a degree, Mark.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, these are the people, like one is blocking her and another is pushing her. What did you think? Like,
No, I mean, I don't think there are any traditional antagonists in this. I think they, have the form of some sort of stumbling block, something that she has to that Juliet has to, our main character has to, obstacle, has to get around or over or figure out to some extent. And so, this takes the Nazis are gone, so you don't have that kind of antagonist, right? And it's not that kind of movie. But so yeah, all these other people, and often when you're writing, there's other blockages too. If it's not yourself, if it's not your own self editor, if it's not, your own self publisher that says, I don't know if this would make any money or reach any audiences, there's other things. And and it makes sense. My grandmother had a career, probably would have had a career as a writer, but the men around her said, nope, I think you're done with that now. It's time to start a family, kind of thing.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah. She wrote like I did. She wrote freelance after, like, in maturity, after the kids were grown up and that sort of thing. So that's how she got back into it. But yeah, I mean,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that totally checks that sort of pushback that Glenn is like, hey, your little trip, how's your little trip going?
Yeah. You could, great place, Central Park, great place. There's schools. He does the thing about the pond and how kids play, the sailboats. They sail their little boats in it, and it's, it's gentle, but it's kind of there. It's like, if you go to the States with them, he's got, hey, you missed dinner with the Richardsons missed you, or whatever, whoever the other family, like that couple kind of stuff, Yeah,
we have dinner on. You can stay on the island, but don't forget we have dinner on Wednesday
with the Murdochs, or whoever the hell they were.
Yeah. And going to another country, frankly, when you're a writer, you have your network of contacts and publishers and that kind of thing. And she wouldn't have her Sydney there, her dashing little Sydney to help her out. So over in New York,
her very gay.
Yes.
In what was a beautiful little moment, because I mean, it's only later you go, oh yeah, he is coded gay.
Yes, yeah.
But it isn't
clean, thin, and neat. Wasn't that the Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah. But it was interesting. It's with the character Isola, who's both perceptive and totally imperceptive, because this is also a thing about reading people, right? How people are forever trying to read each other, and they sometimes get it, they sometimes don't. Mark obviously is not reading that he may not quite have this woman on you know, totally on the hook,
Yes, yeah.
you know.
Even though it's Glenn Powell, I think Dragon Movie Guy has some comments
Yeah.
there, but
Yeah. Yeah, no, but I don't know. Michael Heisman's Dossie, he definitely had that. You know, there's one scene where it's like, oh my goodness, this is like a poor, truly, literally a poor person's uh, Pride and Prejudice with it's Lily James instead of Keira Knightley, Michael Heisman. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Michael Heisman instead of Matthew McFadden, as he comes up and he's semi bare chested and very masculine.
chopping
And then
wood
there's
or
Heisman, you know, this pig farmer, you know, has obviously been doing actual manual labor. You know, they have that little breathless moment.
There's
But
one scene where when a pig runs away, and I have to think it's sort of ad-libbed. You know, I don't know. Pig, you're doing your blocking wrong, but he sort of takes off and he sort of has to run after it or whatever. But
well,
it's
no,
kind of a
I'm
neat
thinking
little
about
moment.
when she is caught. Speaking of, again, you have these mirrors, right? What is she doing? She's caught in his room reading from a book of his.
Oh yes, yeah.
Now it's the book that I think it was originally her book that he found in the bookshop. It's also got, I think, a note from her in it, but it's a moment of like, he's caught her in his room, you know, snooping around.
Yeah.
Not unlike a one Charlotte Stimple,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, maybe not as a group, you know, maybe a bit more endearing than that, but
Well,
than
no,
stooping
but
into an unwritten
it's a push.
manuscript.
It's a mirror. Like, I mean, they're doing it on purpose. Why are they doing it on purpose? And I think it's why is she doing it versus why is Charlotte Stimple doing it? I think it's done there to contrast. You know,
well,
I don't
it was my book.
But I don't think we're supposed to interpret it differently. It's how did I put it once? It was like, you know what? I can't quite bring that one home. I'm gonna hold on that. I may bring it back later. Jim, I want to talk more. I want to ask you more about it is about a writer. What did you think about how she wrote? Did it, you as a professional writer, as someone who's freelanced, who's had to do that research, especially done, you know, hasn't all of your work been nonfiction, correct?
Yeah.
How did the way they presented her as a writer feel to you? Notwithstanding the remarkable relationship with her GBF publisher, who apparently manages their money.
You know, the only thing I didn't like was that sort of like she's obviously on the scent of a story that she's really enthusiastic about. So she's staying on this island for a little bit, and they're saying, "Bet, what about this speaking engagement and that speaking engagement?" And it's almost like the plot example of the librarian saying "shh" in the library. Like it's just this thing that they use to sort of like, you know, not quite a sort of Damocles, but just something hanging there that's bugging you. That's about the only thing it's just, you know, forget the speaking engagements. Let her concentrate on this. But the rest of it, you know, the time spent in the library, and they show her going several times, or the newspaper office.
Yeah.
Something I've done in small towns specifically, is going to that office, going through the clippings files and things like that. And she does it multiple times. It's not just like once, right?
Yeah.
And they do show her, and they speak about her hammering away on her typewriter. It's a time intensive thing, especially activity, especially back then when you didn't have everything at your fingertips in the form of a magic box with letters and numbers, right? Yeah, that's connected to the entire world.
Yeah.
But so you did have to make these trips to the library, and you did have to, do a lot of legwork as well as writing. And it shows that she's, it doesn't show her not writing, right? And it also, thank God, doesn't have any like Rocky like montages of 80s rock with her going, you can't write it.
Yeah.
She's it fades out and fades into something else.
Or
And
the hoary old the blank page and I'm struggling.
The Jack Nicholson Shining, just kind of sitting there. And I thought it did a fairly good job represent as much as you can in a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. And even I will not see it again in quite the same way now. Is you're absolutely right. Maybe they hammered on that a little too hard, the speaking engagements and that. At the same time, I did think it was kind of a reminder of this life in London that she is actively avoiding.
Yeah.
That she's like, it's not just she's on to something, but it's like, I don't want to be bugged by that.
It does serve function.
Yeah.
Like that, and it's there for that purpose, right? It's to show that she's torn between these two things. I'm with you on that, but I'm like, it was a reminder of that which she's running away from, which she's avoiding. She's trying to figure something. She is not just figuring out the mystery of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, Jim. She's figuring out the mystery in her heart. Yes. Yeah. And it serves its purpose. I mean, it's not a deal breaker, but it's one of those things.
But what I am taking away from this is that even you, like for me, having done a little writing, but nothing to the extent you have, and I've worked for a couple of writer-directors, but it's what I thought was it skipped so many of those tropes. It included things with a ton of research, all the notes, all the note-taking, that's where this kind of writing happens. It is not in I will face the page and I will just burp it all out in one mad night because I've finally been released. It's a lot of that grind. It's the Dawsey, like she finds almost like 18 fascinating stories that she could go down, and she, I really like that. I also like the fact that when she found something, she didn't let it go. She would challenge the society members,
the other thing too, though, and that is another aspect about it that a lot of movies about writing don't touch upon, is that relationship with the subject or subjects. And in this case, there are, regardless of what people say, there are some negotiations. The one that's often frowned on is I want to take a look at it before you publish it. Well, that's generally not allowed, especially for like magazine or media writing. But in this case, she said, if anybody has any objections, it's your story. It's very private. If anybody has any objections, I won't publish it. I just wrote it to write it. And that's kind of an interesting take on it as well.
I also liked that because there's everyone, they're all dealing with trauma and they're trying to get through it, right? Some characters less than others, but they all get a moment. And Amelia, the one who's struggling, I think, the most of all of them, Jim, the old lady who's lost so much. Her husband died in the First World War to the Germans. They took him
Mhm.
away. And then
Yeah.
her own daughter in the bombing, and if
Right.
memory serves, her daughter was pregnant at the
Yeah.
time, so both her and her babies lost. And then this Elizabeth, who was the daughter's friend, who became kind of her surrogate daughter,
Yeah.
she is taken, literally taken away. Taken
Mhm.
to the continent, and as we find out later, she dies heroically in Ravensbrück
Ravensbrück, yeah.
in a concentration camp. Um, she is the one who holds. She is the one is the that gives her Juliet the most pushback, but all the others kind of go, listen, not my story to tell, and they'll confirm parts of it, but they don't. Emilia, they're protecting as much that not just Kit, the Elizabeth's daughter, but I think Amelia.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it isn't until Amelia kind of has her, okay, we now know. And because at the end, when she does send the book and she's like, I'm sorry, I know I said I wouldn't write it, and yet here we are.
Mhm.
But before Dossie reads the letter anymore, where she says, listen, I'm not publishing it's for you. Um, It's your story to do with as you please. Another thing that is referred to earlier
Mhm.
by Isola. But before that even comes out, there's Amelia with Kit, and she shrugs. No anger, no pop of anger. She just shrugs. She's like, and I think like something has happened for her that she can move on.
Yeah.
She
Mhm.
does not feel this threat. Enough is known now that she's like, okay, well, what'll happen will happen. Um, but that does raise another question. Because this like asks so many things, like even about bravery and resistance.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
did you like Elizabeth is this force of nature that we only see in flashback? Well, I don't think anyone's thinking she's alive.
Yeah.
The society is in maybe not denial, but they're not. Again, Amelia's unwilling to let go, so they're
They're
all
playing
held
along.
back by that.
Yeah.
But once we also know, and this is, I mean, Amelia feels guilt over that, but Juliet is saying to Dossie, it's like she shouldn't have, as we discover, Elizabeth, the reason she's taken away is she was helping a slave worker, um, and she was
Oh.
caught. She was, well, caught because she was turned in by another fink. Um,
Yeah.
and Juliet is challenging Dossie, but also challenging the memory of Elizabeth, saying she shouldn't have done that. She had a kid. She should have been responsible. That wasn't fair to Kit. It wasn't fair to you, Dossie, to do that.
Mhm.
And that is, I don't think the movie answers it, which I think is part of the genius of this film. But I was wondering, what did you think about that? Do you think the movie actually answers whether or not Elizabeth was right in the choice she made?
Mm.
Um, and what did you think about the choice she made and its impact on the group?
Well,
I mean, I
you know,
certainly have an opinion on it, but
yeah. I think she's isn't she the one that initially named the society? Like when they got caught, they're out for that picnic or that that
it's
late night
she
kind of thing.
started it. She was like
Yeah.
the Guernsey, she's like the
Or
Guernsey literary, and then of course, oh, what's his name? The grandpa there, the
Tom
postmaster.
Courtney.
He's like, and potato peel pie. Society.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so
But she is
she's
the reason. She's the reason they got together. She's
yeah.
the reason that brought them all together. Not just over the pig earlier, but as Dossie was saying in his letters to Juliet, she really was the one who reminded them of their humanity, of who she was the let's say the straw that stirs the drink.
Yeah, and in that way, she was a bit of a leader too. So if someone's gonna do something like that, it's gonna out of all of them, it's probably gonna be her. Although others are capable of it, I'm sure. Interestingly, when they only referred to and I remember reading about this and seeing documentaries about this, but the slave labor that the Germans brought onto the Channel Islands there.
Yeah.
They actually referred to them in the movie as and I
Tote
think they wrote
workers.
tote workers. Tote means dead in German,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
these are people that
Walking
are
Dead.
the Walking Dead, yeah,
Yeah.
and they're actually openly called that. So,
Yeah.
but she was saving this one, and then when she dies, the thing that ultimately really gets the attention of the authorities is that uh, some girl was being beaten in the camp, and then she stopped it,
Well,
and that
her
she
final. She
yeah,
didn't just interfere. She grabbed the
beat
stick
up
he was using to
Mhm.
beat the girl and beat him with it.
him with, and they
Yeah.
shot her.
Yeah.
And so, I think that through line of the character makes sense is that she
Yeah,
does
but
have these
that's
sort
not
of
the question I
qualities.
was asking, Jim.
Okay.
I was asking, what did you think? Was she right
Oh,
to help to give Dossie Kit
yeah.
to
Oh, to
help
give credit.
the slave worker? Because that's Juliet is
Yeah.
challenging him on that. It wasn't right for her to do that. It wasn't fair to Kit. It wasn't fair to you. Now, of
Yeah.
course, there's a lot going on in that scene.
Yeah.
You know, again, the mystery of her heart. She is saying more than it isn't fair. She's also saying, "Was it fair to me? I could have been with you, and now you're stuck with the memory of this woman that we don't know, and blah blah blah
Mhm.
blah."
Yeah, I don't, I don't think there were any options, and I think that this Elizabeth made so the decisions that she made were pretty big ones, and they were made pretty quickly. So whether she was right or wrong or not, I think it's more the question of inevitability.
Well,
Like, there's no father. There's like, who else was going to take care of her?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, no, but that's she's not in the spur of the moment. She has made choices. Like
Oh, that's right. Yeah, too, because
yeah,
she's just going out for a few minutes.
yeah,
She said
this
we'll
is
be right back.
this isn't like I agree with you. This is who the Elizabeth character is.
Yeah.
It's seen from the fact that she stays in Guernsey.
Mhm.
She is
Mhm.
active in the community. She is committed to this place in a way that the locals haven't. She is the one who screams at the German soldiers, then
Yes.
then
The
at
parade.
the police.
Yeah.
You know, and then Amelia, like, I mean, because this movie's got things about bravery here. Like, no one
Mm.
can question her courage. But I
Yeah.
found it fascinating, and I'll let it go after this. But I think one of the fascinating things about this film is that they have a character who asks that, and then they don't give a pat answer. There
Yeah.
is no pat answer to whether or not Elizabeth was right. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right,
I
Jim.
don't think there is. Yeah.
Her character is it's who she was,
Mhm.
and it makes sense she dies the way she dies. But I think this is another thing I find fascinating about this film, Jim, is it presents all these different kind of ideas about resistance
Mhm.
and vengeance and evils of war and the evils of occupation. And maybe this is the time, Jim. First of all, we'll get into the, with your permission, maybe it's time for me to bring up the social nutrition checklist.
Oh yeah.
And then I want to explore this idea of resistance, because we will be discussing resistance in other ways. But first, I'm giving it a 25%. It would not have gotten a reframe stamp. It also, it's probably unionized. It is an English production. There's a high rate of unionization for their films, but I don't know. I couldn't find out, couldn't confirm. So question mark, and can't give it points for that. It definitely does have, passes the Bechdel test. Does it have a working class perspective? I say no, Jim, but there is maybe the thing should get an honorable mention in that it is, and this goes to even the way they talk about books and the way it's both writing and reading and deep reading. There is something to be said about this flick that, again, it's not a working class perspective. The heroine is the heroine, she is obviously of the middle classes, of English middle classes. Even Amelia, I think her main antagonist, not villain, is a country bourgeois, but, and this is another thing that I love about this flick, but is this film has a deep respect for readers and of regular people, because it's not just Amelia, it's Isola, the local weirdo bootlegger. It's the little boy, it's the grandson. Oh, for crying out loud, it's going to drive me nuts, Jim, if I don't look up okay. So it's Tom Courtenay plays Eben Ramsey. That's right. the old man, Grandpa, the postmaster, and is not Niccolo Passetti. Kit Connor plays Eli Ramsey. So you got Eli, Isola, you've got Dossie, the pig farmer, and laborer about town, because
builder
and they are all reading, critiquing, interpreting, and arguing about the books they read. And that the film in no way makes it sound quirky or, oh, look at those plucky peasants trying to muddle their way through. They are, and it presents it as legitimate. It makes me think about what you and I do with film here. They're deep reading. They give no quarter. They're not jerks about it, but they're certainly passionate about their opinions. And the film assumes that says, yes, it's perfectly valid for these people to have valid critical insights into these books. And they're talking about Virginia Woolf, but they're also Charles Lamb, which is kind of a, Shakespeare on training wheels, perhaps. And, they're arguing about the Bronte sisters and the politics of Anne versus Charlotte, and women's empowerment. And I put only air quotes because it is set in a certain time.
It gets a bit spiky too. Like it's not adversarial, but there's actually they're
passionate.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of that speed chess that it's okay. Next point.
Yeah,
you got a minute.
But they don't and even later, so the last scene, the last visual scene, of course, is the happy couple. Of course, she picks Dossie. You know, she steps in as a surrogate mother for Kit. They're living in Elizabeth's cottage.
Mhm.
But over the credits, we hear them again. It's the book club, and it's talking about it. The son, the boy who's growing up into a young man. He is brought in as an equal member, as someone
Yeah.
they're teaching, but he's you know. The kid's going to have a great, education at great English major on the way. But even
And it's not,
later,
and he's not
Sydney,
treated in a
we
condescending
hear
way.
Sydney in there,
Oh yeah.
like, and they're all given equal weight. It's not, oh, you must be an expert. It's not
Yeah.
no one bandies about education.
Mhm.
Amelia doesn't go, well, at college I was. They'd have none of that posturing.
Mhm.
And I'm like, damn, that's what we do on the show, Jim.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
And as far as the kid goes, a couple notes about the way they handle children. At no time is it ever. First of all, it's not like a Hollywood casting kid with a bowl cut and
No.
everything else. But at no time is it condescending.
No.
To the child. And in fact, and I think he's Eben's grandson, but there was a scene that caught me off guard a little bit is when they evacuated the kids, and Tom Courtney's character says, yeah, that was the worst day of the war when they put the kids on the ferries and sent them back to the mainland. And I thought that was, again, not something you see all the time in movies. It's sort of one of those byproducts of war that don't get
not the
focus.
byproduct, the consequence.
The consequence, yeah,
You mentioned it earlier.
Sort of a side
stakes.
thing.
Everything stakes.
Has nothing to do with General Montgomery
No.
or planes or tanks or whatever.
What'll happen in this battle?
Supply lines, yeah. It's all that sort of the equally important, but it's that cost to humanity, right? And it was touching. It was a touching scene. Like it was. I was like, woo.
Even the child, though, when he comes back taller. He's like, well, I didn't get much reading in Hartford or wherever the hell he went.
Yeah.
Which is almost like it'd be interesting if that was even maybe a tiny allusion to a lot of these kids, whether they're evacuated to the country in England or Canada, New Zealand, Australia. A lot of them were basically shipped off as farm labor.
Oh, yeah.
Who were ignored and at times terribly abused.
Oh,
so he comes back, he's not gotten an education, but the group is, because they've held together, they're bringing him along.
Yeah.
They've taken him in hand.
He's got a good job at the post office, and it's not too bad.
Perhaps a union gig.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, well, actually, you know what? The way it's surprising, he's probably now in jail because of the terrible the travesty of justice that is.
Oh yes,
the Royal Mail.
Mr. Brown versus the post office, or whatever the Toby Jones project was, which was great.
Jim. Maybe it's I could talk about this film for another hour, but maybe it's time for me to make my case to you about this being a Fight Club and to talk about resistance. First of all, when you think of Fight Club, Jim, I think of a movie that really it is a satire. It's a dark film. I watched it again this weekend just to kind of go, "Hey, wait a sec, is my memory serving me well on this flick?" And it's like, oh yeah, no, this is the movie. It's definitely a satirical critique, a criticism of consumerism, late stage capitalism, alienation, like how disconnected everyone is as they churn away at their crappy jobs. And that the only way these men can feel is through violence. This is the way they get their balls back. Metaphorically.
Yeah.
It starts with the testicular cancer, group where they've had them removed to now this violence, and this is how they can be men again. And of course, what is the final expression of that masculinity? Let's burn the whole place down, which I think, Jim, really is. The movie is relevant today, perhaps more relevant today, as we see. What do you call them? Incels, or, these Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, all these right-wing nuts. They are these guys, in the real world, expressing their masculine, getting their manhood, getting their balls back by burning it all down. And meanwhile, and I do, Jim, I kind of look at the Fight Club as sort of, well, there's the one of the main roots of fascism, is, this hearkening to our masculine selves. Like, it's a part of how fascism works, how these systems get set up. So back in perhaps time, but later on, we get in the Guernsey and Literary Potato Peel, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, TGLP cubed S. We have a movie that is a response to a fascist occupation, where these people are also alienated from each other, alienated from what they do. The guy literally has his pigs taken away from him. You grow kartoffel now. You grow potatoes. Yeah. That's your job. And they're not connected to each other, so they're slipping in notes at the beginning of the film to get together. And they get together over this act of resistance of killing a pig they should have turned over to the fascists and making a meal.
Yeah.
And, of course, they get drunk on Isola's hooch. And all of a sudden, they end up getting stuck having to do this book club, because they're in a bind now. But this little moment of resistance becomes this life-sustaining act of resistance in the sheer getting together, maintaining those connections, expressing themselves in their heart, being open to each other. It is a way of resisting this occupation, that I think is the answer. If Fight Club, Jim, is diagnosing a problem, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society is the prescription for a cure. Real human connection, real engagement. And that maybe it isn't, and what is also interesting, the bravest people, Fight Club, it's all about just male violence, but they're not brave.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, here, I do think Juliet is brave. She pushes everyone, much like Elizabeth did. She is that thing they were missing in a way.
Mm-hmm.
She is brave. Dossie's brave. The men are brave. Even Dossie does get a moment of violence by beating up the guy who turned in Elizabeth. You know,
Yeah.
what did Eben say? Is, oh, could have sold tickets.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, this great moment where these men get, in a way, a bit of their dignity back, appropriately applying violence. But it's Elizabeth who actually challenges the Germans, who shames them, who
Mm-hmm.
does the, and it can't be, everyone can't be Elizabeth. There are kids to take care of. Heck, it's just, it was inevitable what she did. You get it. From the first scene, you see her and the way she behaves with the Germans. It's like, oh yeah, of course she would help a tote worker. Of course she would help a fellow inmate in Ravensbrück, and of course they'd shoot her eventually.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for all her heroism, it's only Charlotte and the buddy who's the Fink that you judge. Everyone else, it's like we resist as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things. That's why I do. I think it is. Maybe I went too far, Jim, in saying it's the anti-Fight Club. Maybe it's the answer to Fight Club is saying we have a problem here. And the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society is saying, well, here's a way we can address that. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two general kinds of reaction you can have to any given thing, and one is to destroy stuff, and one is to build stuff, right? And so they're building something. They probably the easy and cool way, and this is why kids have Darth Vader on their lunch boxes sometimes.
Yeah.
Is by destroying things, right, and by showing strength that way. But what is the Smiths line? It takes strength to be gracious and kind, this is another kind of, it's a lower key thing, but it's another form of strength, not as performative, not as posy, because Fight Club's pretty posy in a lot of ways.
Well,
and they're building something.
Yeah.
They're creating something, and it always takes more courage, I think, to create something and to destroy it.
Yeah. Well, and I do, like, don't get me wrong, I don't think Fight Club is saying this is a good thing. That's why I like it. This is a problem.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually kind of give you it doesn't, and I'm not saying it should, but it doesn't suggest a solution. It sort of says, if we keep going down this road, well, guess what? Things are going to burn.
Yeah, this is like Reverend Lovejoy's 7 tenets of constancy, kind of. Maybe he's got some there. I don't know.
Well, but meanwhile, in the film we're talking about tonight, in the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society.
Oh, well, you got it twice. Good, you got it correct twice in a row. That's better than me.
In this film, though, I think, Jim, it is here's another vision of how you can resist these bastards. That you can, that the real answer to this, the how you're going to get through this trauma, which we're all going through. I mean, it's not as bad as Palestine. And that horror, or Ukraine, but, you think about the United States, especially some of these poor bastards who are, their families are being torn apart because the guys because the guys in this movie.
Mm.
You know, that's where they end up. They don't end up in actual fight clubs, Jim. These guys end up police bullying a couple of, Canadians in a car, tearing a husband and wife apart, sending some poor father legally allowed to be in where they are off to an El Salvadoran black hole. Literally the country he was given asylum from. That's where these assholes end up. Not in a fight club, but there. And it's in this film, you see a way forward, a way not just during it, but also afterwards. If Elizabeth is part of what got them through it, Juliet, in a way, she addresses her stuff by helping these people move forward, helps find Elizabeth, gets her story, because this is a movie about stories. I just, yeah. That, Jim. That's why I think it's like it's the answer. It's maybe not the anti-fight club, but there's a thesis and the thesis that Poliniak and what's his name?
Fincher.
Thank you. That are satirizing is actually seriously and emotionally and genuinely answered its antithesis is found in this film.
Quick story about Fight Club here.
Please.
The family, it's about 10 years ago now, the family and I went for an Atlantic Canada a month, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We were driving around Atlantic Canada, hitting all 4 provinces. Of course, we went to PEI. And of course, when you're in PEI, you go to Green Gables, especially with my wife and my daughter, and they were fans. So we went to Green Gables one day, and the staff were there. We had something at the gift shop. We were buying something, and 2 were sort of exchanging, like, you take the cash register, I'm going to go on my break. And you could tell this was sort of a dissatisfied, not quite goth, but you thought, how did she get this job? And she went and walked out the back door with a copy of the Fight Club in her hand. And I thought that was, I thought that the Lucy Montgomery and Chuck Palahniuk sort of, juxtaposition was an interesting one. Anyway, it sort of won me over. I was like, yeah, she's pretty cool.
That's a good one. Jim, before we get into final thoughts, I do want to maybe talk a bit more about resistance. So with your permission, let's jump into Resist with Rob. Let's all learn to resist with Rob. I know I do think that this movie kind of shows a path of resistance. But there's other ways to resist, sometimes even before the when you're just under threat. And you and I, Jim, we're out for that. We were at a whoopsie, not what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to do. You and I were out at a rally. Rally for Canada. That's right, folks. There was a rally Jim and I were at just today, a rally for Canada, no to the 51st state. A bit of a big public pushback as part of the larger hands-off kind of pushback we saw all over the United States, all over the world, regarding Palestine and Ukraine. This was Winnipeg's little contribution. I took this picture specifically because, Jim, I wanted to highlight the fact that, you know what? Canada likes to resist with bouncy castles. There was some
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a dramarama on threads about someone who was perhaps a little, maybe a little clueless in talking about what, it'd be nice if there's a bouncy castle for a kid at the first protest you'd ever been to.
Mm.
Myself, Jim, I'm like, hey, if it's the first time, if a bouncy castle will get you out to the rally, you know what? If we could get a bouncy castle, what the hell?
Yes. Yeah.
Of course, this was in Canada. It's the Manitoba provincial legislature there. Wob Canoe is our premier. This was very much an official hashtag, hashtag official resistance. But Jim, yeah, like I said, both Jim and I were there. There's me, and I got to admit, it's the best look I ever had at a rally, and that's a selfie. I can't believe I took that good a picture. Here's a picture I took of you, Jim, looking serious, looking very.
My Canon.
You, you got the mix of the journalist. It's like, oh, am I watching an early shot of Civil War? And
Yeah, exactly.
but you took some great shots of this rally. There's a what did you call her? A well-prepared?
Yes, a well-prepared woman.
Yeah. Scott Oakes, local sportscaster and general local celebrity. Love this picture. Of course, there's, how did you describe it on?
Guys wouldn't stop moving. I had, there's all this thing in street photography about natural frames. So I thought, I'll get Premier Canoe through this, guys.
Yeah.
I made another version where I close up, and so he's a little more distinct. You can tell who's speaking there, but yeah. Guy wouldn't stop moving.
And then, of course, Canada's Winnipeg's answer to Bernie Sanders. His mitts are covered up by that maple leaf themed Afghan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim, I think again, a million ways of resisting. I think one of the things this film highlights, and what you and I did, and of course there were other friends there. There is something to be said. I'm all for. I love what we do here on the show, and I do think what we do here as part of an attempt to educate people, to analyze their films, to read their films at a deeper level, to get more out of it, but to also understand what it's selling you.
And educating ourselves too about it.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, but there is very much an important, there's nothing better, but it is an important thing to connect in the real world, IRL. Does that mean you got to go to every rally? No. Yeah, there's some rallies that's like, well, there is no bouncy castle. Maybe there's no bouncy castle. Maybe you shouldn't bring your kids because it could be bad.
Yeah.
Find the level of resistance of participant, but there is something to be said for public participation with other human beings.
Yeah.
And I think this film kind of underlines that. They do something together. They break bread together, or in one horrible case, potato peel pies. How does he put it? No flour,
sugar,
no sugar, no flour,
salt,
no butter,
flour,
just
no
potatoes and potato peelings.
Yeah.
How the hell can I remember that verbatim? But I do, I think there's something to be said for participating in these rallies, but also for connecting with. So anybody watching this and kind of wonder, what do I do? Where do I start? You know what? I don't know. Join a club, not a fight club. Join a book club. Join us here online. Who knows? If you live in Winnipeg, You know what? DM us. You can see both Jim and I's ats. You can find us on social media. It's also in the description. Reach out. Maybe we'll start a film club, a once-a-month thing here in Winnipeg, where we pick the thing, do it just like the really long title people do, except it'll be about movies or something. But yeah, I think that's a part of resistance. And, we see a lot of online discourse, Jim. You and I have talked about this, of people kind of, how can I put it? They're getting ready to hunt, bear hunting. They're gonna be manning the ramparts. Admire the energy, but there are a million ways of resisting. And a lot of it, if we do a lot of stuff now, I think that helps stop the worst. For me, Jim, I mean, just like these Americans protesting over the last couple of days, everything makes the regimes that we're fighting, the billionaires that we're fighting, that are trying to screw us all, a little more, do we go? Oh, maybe we stop. Maybe we hold.
Mhm.
Maybe we pause. And every stop, every hold, every pause, every pushback is a victory. So we do this stuff now. Maybe we don't have to man the ramparts later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
if we do this now, all of a sudden, even the bastards, it affects what is going on in Moscow, because they're like, oh, maybe our buddy won't be able to help us out doing our dirty, terrible war crimes in Ukraine. And Netanyahu in Tel Aviv going, oh, I might not have. And I think all this stuff adds up. So yeah, there's Resist with Rob for today. Jim, anything you wanted to add to that?
They're just sending out discs across the world. What is this triangle of sadness? Maybe I'll watch it. Yeah, no, I think you covered it pretty well there. A lot of bad actors out there, and they seem to have control of a lot of levers there. So it's interesting to watch it progress. But yeah, there's things that we can do definitely, and it's good to hear that. I mean, I walked with my mom back, 15 years ago. What was the big march here? Was against the invasion of Iraq, I think.
Yeah.
It's good to find other voices and to sort of gather together.
Absolutely,
I think you're right there.
Yeah, it's the one of the ways these folks get you is by making you feel alone and alienated.
Yeah.
A Marxist term for you, alienation.
Mind you, that was 2006 and way before a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff had gone down.
Oh yeah,
has.
but those things say any of these rallies, these protests, these groups, whether it be a group of 5 or a group of 5,000, you're not alone.
Yes.
You're not the one on crazy pills. There is something terrible going on, and getting together and just saying, hey, this sucks, this is BS, is good for the soul.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think has real positive impact. Does that mean that terrible things won't continue to happen, or it could still get worse? Of course not. Things can certainly get worse, but things eventually do, and they get better, and you'll be able to say, yeah, I kept my humanity. I resisted. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Well, Jim, we have another long one, but we are getting to that point where I think it is time to talk about final thoughts. Why don't you start us off there, Jim?
Yeah, just a couple of little notes that I wrote here. Is 1940s movies, do they have to by law have a dancing scene? It's just, someone's not doing the every single one, and it dates it well. Like you're able to place it along with the hairstyles, of course. That and the English with their toast. They always got to be making or eating toast. They have that little rack that they put it in. That's something you see it in spy movies. You see it in this. You see it all over the place. So there's two things I did want to mention. Is kind of an interesting little career note is that Jessica Brown Findlay, who plays Elizabeth in this, an absentee, not her fault, but an absentee mother because she's been murdered by Germans, the Nazis. Also was a woman that died in wedlock in childbirth, childbirth in Downton Abbey. So this is twice now. Is that being typecast? I don't know, but that she's played these sort of like absentee mothers.
Those tragic mothers, tragic mothers, death. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That is, and that makes me think, Jim, one of the, this is a movie with layers. She does fall in love with the German, the doctor, the good German, but it doesn't feel like a trope because of the way they deal with it. Because the midpoint of the movie, the climax, more of a classical idea of a climax, but the midpoint raising of the stakes is again a great peripeteia. Juliet commits to helping, finds out Kit's but she's the father's a German. Which raises a whole bunch of stuff that they talk about but don't answer. Again, no pat answers. The first of all of a sudden, it's Isola who all pushes back and says, well, we're all from someone. The humanity of the child is not, and not in some kind of weird anti-abortion crazy crap. But this kid we're all from someone. That she loves him and that he's maybe not a fascist is also then allows to have that let's say that conversation with Amelia, because Amelia's like, I don't want this kid to go, like, because now Juliet is saying, well, she's gonna have real loved ones. What if his parents are still alive? You're keeping this child from them. And Amelia's like, I'm not giving them one more. They don't get to take one more person from me.
Yeah.
And that is like, ugh. And they don't answer it. Like, or they, no, I don't think they answered. They don't go, well, she's right. They just kind of, well, this is what it is. You're kind of left with it's wrong, but I get why, and I wouldn't be taking the kid. I wouldn't be taking, like, you kind of like, there's something not right here, but who am I to, And I think that's just, it's genius of this film to present these real moral quandaries, to have these folks have this, to put it out there and kind of go, oh, it's not as simple. Like Charlotte going the jerry bags, and these, and we saw another movie, again, a more women-centered film, Lee, a much weaker film, I think, but also another one that had a lot more sympathy for these women who were shamed afterwards. This is in France. The Lee actually documented it. But here we're faced with this. That's the secret they're keeping. Things are not as they seem, is that this kid is a child of a German, and they don't want to lose this child that they think is that they for all intents and purposes is theirs.
Yeah.
Damn. Thanks for bringing that up, Jim, because I almost forgot about that.
Yeah.
For me, I want to. So, because I've been going crazy at the library, Jim, in the new biographical dictionary film, 6th edition.
Oh my.
By David Thompson, another Thompson, in his brief biography of Mike Newell. What is interesting is Newell, and this will come up later, folks. I am going to be doing a thing on what I am going to call the Rob's modified or Rob's movie and television propaganda model, where I talk about more about the creator and where they come from, especially from a class perspective. Newell is from the middle classes. But unlike a lot of American films where they are they totally buy into that worldview, I think Mike Newell, because he is older, was like some of his earliest work was adapting working like British working class playwrights, these folks that came up after the war because Labour subsequent or successive Labour governments really funded higher education for working class people and made it easy through, public, the dole that you could, so you go to school, you go on the dole, go to school and become a writer. You're living hand to mouth, but you could do it. Much like the rich do it, they're just living hand to mouth on their parents' estate,
Yes.
And I think that is why one of the reasons I suspect this film is the way it is, that it has that sensitivity because he, regardless of the class he came from, he worked in this milieu where there were a lot more diversity of class voices. There is, of course, no brown people in this film at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you get in the weird kind of thing of it, it's historical, but it's like, yeah, so I'm not saying like a whole Bridgerton thing, but but no film's perfect. But yeah, I think that was what I wanted to add. That was my final thoughts.
His resume is crazy. Like he's got a Harry Potter movie in there, and there's a couple things that really stand out.
It's nuts.
Very.
DMG. I want to give the last word, if it's cool with you, Dragon Movie Guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, who's the Tyler Durden of Guernsey? I'm sorry. I find that that deserves. Whoops.
Here it comes.
That deserves one of those, maybe two. Yes, DMG, anyone else out there, whether they're lurking or they're in the chat now, definitely, if you haven't seen this, put it on the list. It had a brief theatrical run in the United Kingdom, and I think in France, but definitely the United Kingdom. It is on Netflix, though. It is a Netflix film, so you can catch
Netflix
it on
Canada.
Yeah. No, I think Netflix worldwide.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. So it is technically a Netflix film, like one of those, we'll buy it afterwards, not just get a license for it. I also would say, you know what, I'll shamelessly, one more time, beg for a like, a subscribe, and hey, Jim, ring-a-ding that bell.
No Tyler Durden here. This is a real bell.
On that note, everyone, thank you all very much for coming out. Really appreciate it. Well, I don't know. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night, Mr.